this new tutorial, I'm going to walk you through the whole process of making a Wonderland game from start to finish. The material in this tutorial builds off of my last tutorial, and I would expect that you know the whole design interface of Miliastra before continuing with this tutorial. The creator level is the tiered advancement system Hoyo has set up for Miliastra developers. You need to advance to level 2 in order to make a game like I show in this tutorial, since this game requires being able to have custom text in the game. Really, almost any game you make will need to have custom text, like for instructions, for example. No worries, though. It's really easy to get your first advancement. You just have to click here for the link to go to the Crafts People Center. Read the rule and terms and agree to join. Then you will need to pass 2 quizzes that cover the material explained in these 2 official Miliastra tutorials. If you watch both, you should be able to pass no problem. But if you don't pass the first time around, you're allowed to restudy and take them again. Once you pass both quizzes, you will be promoted to Creator Level 2. The next task to do before we get started working on the Wonderland is to join the Creator Front Discord server. This is the official Genshin Miliastra server for game developers, and it's where you will be informed about all important creator events and prize rewards. Also, to submit your Wonderland for consideration for top banner, interact or receive help from other creators, or contact official Hoyo staff. Now that these necessary steps are complete, the first thing we need to do is to make a plan. I'm just going to quickly discuss the pros and cons of making your first Wonderland a quick, easy game, or something more complex. Now, it used to be that in order to apply to top banner, you had to already be creator level 4. Top banner is kind of a must to get your game really seen, and there's thousands upon thousands of published games now, and people may never find your game sifting through that huge pile. However, being level 4 is no longer a requirement, so if you have the confidence and game developing experience, then you can go for a complex game as your first Wonderland. However, you will still not have 2 other really important functions that are locked behind Creator Level 4, which is the ability to have an in-game progress saves for your players and also game achievements. Most really popular games have this, and the players expect these functions, not realizing that they're locked features behind the creator leveling system. Making a short, simple game at first is still a reasonable strategy, as it's quick to complete and you can bug all your friends to do it daily and help you level up quickly. If you go with a simple game design, my advice is to pick a popular meme or holiday, so that people will be more drawn to the thumbnail promo of your game when searching keywords. Now that you have decided the complexity of your first game, the next step is to find inspiration for the design layout. I find it helpful to build Wonderlands from inspiration pictures. These can be from your favorite places in game or real-life landscapes, or whatever really inspires you. Once you find your inspiration, either sketch it out on paper or in your mind the basic layout. For my first Wonderland, my inspo was my mom's Christmas Dickens Village display. I wanted to make a small town square with the Mondstadt houses that have a very quaint English village vibe. In the center of the square, I wanted a decorated Christmas tree with presents all around and then a moving train going around the square. So that was my vision in my mind, and I started laying out the furniture items to make the basic foundation. I clipped several houses together to mimic the close-packed English village streets and wrapped them around 3 sides of the build. For the train track, I made the curves from individual boards, but then I used the ladder furniture for the long straight tracks. Once I finished the main structure layout, I added the focus of the whole build, the Christmas tree. None of the available pine trees were full or bushy enough to be a Christmas tree, so I had to custom make one by squishing down some trees to fill in so that we don't have a straggly tree like in Charlie Brown. One of the most fantastic aspects of designing a Miliastra is that you can resize each furniture in all dimensions. This means you can create almost anything from the most unexpected items, like bleacher seats from a bottle, and my Slime Stars basketball arena asset I published. In my first Wonderland, most objects are just what they seem, and this is a fairly simple design in my opinion. But the snowy mountains are made from flipped upside-down rocks, and all the snow actually is rocks too. This was before the snowball and the ice assets were added to the inventory, but I still think the rocks work really well for snowdrifts. Once you've added all the main components like the streets, sidewalks, landforms, and buildings, I like to add the plants and trees and balance the natural elements across the whole Wonderland. In this build, I tried to stick to just evergreen pine trees and some basic green bushes, which could be like rhododendrons that stay green all winter. It's just a cozy little living room overlooking the village square and the perfect place to load into the game and see the view of the Christmas tree. The outdoor living room railing is made from lots of resized boards to make little spokes. With more and more furniture items being added each patch, there's really hardly a limit at all in creating whatever you can imagine. There's many street lights positioned throughout the design, as the intended game time is at night. And I wanted the atmosphere to still feel cozy. As in anything in life, there will be people who just have a natural talent to do something. But even if that's not you for artistic design, I believe you can still learn and through practice become more than proficient. You may want to study up a bit on basic artistic principles, but if not, that's okay. You can still make excellent Wonderland layouts by sticking to designing straight from your inspiration pictures. Most designs I always say to add more and more plants, as there can never really be enough to make it feel full and natural. But in winter scenes or cityscapes, that's just not the case. So this design is a bit sparse on plants, but it still feels full and lively because I've added so many different decorations, from little ice crystals over the doorways to wreaths and lots of toys and presents. I just wanted to fill up the whole design to make it feel like the overflowing joy of the holiday season. Unless you're going for a minimalist room like a futuristic space station, for example, at most Wonderlands you'll know you're finished with an excellent design when you feel you can't possibly fit in another item. It's better to have an overflowing bounty for your eyes to feast on. Even if your game is simple, people still give you a thumbs up and nice comments if the Wonderland looks incredible. The last step in the design was to add boundaries. I added empty models with collision active at the train entrance and exit to keep players from accidentally glitching through the wall. Lastly, I put empty model barriers all around the whole build so that players could not fall off the map. Now I'm going to add lights and special effects to the build to give it some character. So in your prefab library screen, pick the lamp furniture item you want and drag it out into the screen. Make sure it's a dynamic item and then give it a light source custom component and click Advanced Editing. For a street light, the spotlight type works best. Then move the origin of the light up to the bulb on the street light so that they line up. So you can change the light color to orange for a warm glow and then lower the intensity. Save it as a prefab. Now we can switch back over to the entity placement screen and add the streetlights throughout the build. When you switch to your entity placement screen, you can find your prefabs under the custom category here at the top. This process can then just be repeated for any other lamps you want to add or just areas you want to highlight, like adding a backlight glow to a bookcase, for example. Next, I'm going to show the special effects. So I just used empty model boxes with their collision and climbability turned off. Then I clicked Advanced Editing on the VFX component and added a new component. I used the looping type that is constantly on and does not need a no graph to be triggered. So I found this cryo field and the cryo whirlwind for that place for the entry and exit train. And also this little fire in the fireplace and the stove down on the town square street. In the next section, I'll be adding motion to the train and a couple cute critters. Sketch just gave him a basic motion component with the path movement as the motion type and with the loop setting, so it will keep going and going. Next, I added all these blue waypoints and moved them into place to form this path of going up the slide and down and back around again. You can adjust the time spent between each point and the position and height of your waypoint. Next, I did this little floaty bloaty balloon guy to move up and rotate slightly and then come back down. I again used the path movement type on loop. I think adding these little cute critters moving around really adds something special to a Wonderland. The first step in making the train was to add the passengers and the connector devices as decorations to each train section they are part of. Making the train move around the town square was one of the main ideas of the design, and it was a little tough to get each section to move and rotate fairly well around the track. I couldn't have the train all be linked as one item through the decoration editor, nor could I have each section of the train use a follow motion device of the train engine, because then they would all turn at the same time and not in succession as it pivots around the tracks. So I had to painstakingly add a path movement to each section of the train and just had the middle section and the caboose of the train have increasingly delayed starts and increasingly faster last waypoint finishes, so that the train will sync up when it starts again. The train path does not continue around the back, as I didn't want it to be visible behind the playground. I wanted it to feel like it was magically jumping from one mountainside to the other. The last design touch I did before getting to the main game element is to add little text boxes above the carolers. I wanted it to look like they were singing a Christmas carol. So I did this by adding a text bubble custom component. To adjust the color of the text, you can add this little code and use hex numbers for the colors. The little music note symbol here is white and the song lyrics are green. You can adjust the size of the text too. Next, I added a custom attachment point component because it's the easiest way to adjust the height and position of the text bubbles. This custom attachment point can be chosen in the Select Attach Point drop-down list, right here. Then I just did this for the other two carolers with the rest of the song lyrics. Now we're finally at the point of implementing the main game element. This is super simple, and it's just like the coin pickup shown in the official Miliastra tutorials, except it's catching snowflakes. I think it's really cute. Just like I showed before, I used an empty model box and made a prefab. I found this cryo ring looping special effect that once it finishes the ring animation, it stays perpetually as this little snowflake. The snowflakes need a collision trigger because just like for the coins, I want them to be picked up with a player when the player comes into contact with them. A small sphere around the box works well for the collision shape. I want it only triggered by characters and have the initial effective setting on. Then I gave it a basic motion device component and selected path movement in a loop. I made the path go really far down so that the snowflakes could start high in the sky and fall to the ground. Then in the entity placement screen, I scattered them everywhere, across the sky and at different heights too. Next, we need to add the custom score variable, score, on the player. Make sure you have the player selected and not the character. The min and max values here are for the UI, which I'll explain later in the next section. I did this just by clicking Add New Variable at the bottom and setting the type to integer. The value starts with 0 because no snowflakes have been collected yet. Next, I switched over to Miliastra Sandbox interface and made a node graph, just like in the official demo for coin pickup. If you right-click the screen, this pop-up shows up and you can search for the node type you need. Left-click to connect the nodes with the noodle line. This node graph is attached to the empty models with the snowflake VFX. What happens is the collision trigger of the snowflake is set off by the entering entity, which is the character. The trigger entity is the snowflake itself. Yeah, I know it's weird name choice for the identifiers. So when the player enters this collision, the snowflake registers the character entity. And I have to use the Get Player Entity to which the character belongs node to get the player entity number. Then the node graph sets the custom variable score, which is located on the player, if you remember, right here. So every time the player collides with a snowflake, there's an addition of 1 point added to the score variable on the player. This variable value is calculated by getting the current value of the score on the player and adding 1. Then lastly, the snowflake is destroyed. The next node graph we need is going to be attached to the player here. So we use when a custom variable changes node to start, and the equal blue node specifies that the variable name is equal to the score. So basically, this node graph will only trigger if the variable score changes, and it will not if a separate variable changes like Paimon's meal count for the day. All right, next it asks if the post change value equals 10. So is the player scored 10, meaning they caught 10 snowflakes? If yes, then it continues on to the next connected node. If no, then nothing happens. If the player collected 10 snowflakes, then we set the player settlement success as victory and settle the stage. The game automatically ends for the player. The user interface is an important feature that you should not neglect. Players need guidance to get directions on what to do in games, but also to show their progress so they have an idea on how much more time commitment they need to give before winning. This helps reduce frustration and rage quits. In this main interface tab, this is what UI elements will show up automatically for your player when they start the game. If you want some of these inherent content features turned off, such as the minimap or the character HP bar, then just make sure this initial visibility button is turned off and not blue. This custom tab below is where you will add any UI that you've created and want to be visible to the player for the start of the game, without having to be called up in a node graph. In the UI Control Group Library tab, you can create a custom UI. I made the Snowflake Collection Progress bar by clicking on this button at the bottom called Add UI Control Template. Then I selected a text box and a progress bar. If I select both of these at the same time, I can right-click and then pick Create Combination. Open up that combination so that you can see both the text and the progress bar within it, and select the text box UI, and I typed in snowflakes for the title. Then I can change the size of the text font. Next, I changed the color to green. For the UI, they added these custom grid selectors now, so we don't have to use the hex codes here, which is a great quality of life feature addition. I also set the waypoint settings to the left. This was done for all the device types tabs. So for mobile and PlayStation, for example. Then for the progress bar, I selected the functions tab and changed the color of the progress bar. You can also change the % completion on the progress bar viewer. This is just to see how it looks at all stages of completion and obviously doesn't affect the starting point of the progress bar in the game. A very important step here, I have to set the current progress, which I want to be the current score of the player. So how many snowflakes have they picked up so far? Then I set the minimum and maximum values for this range, which is stored as a custom variable on the player. So the minimum amount of snowflakes they can have is 0, and the maximum amount is 10, because that is the value that ends the game in the previous node graph that we set up. I must save the template, and then it can be found in the list at the top here of the available templates. Anything in the bottom half is just your working space. I can delete the template in the bottom half, and it just removes it from the working space, but not from the list of saved templates at the top. Next, it's important to make sure the custom UI you made looks correct for all device types that play Genshin. The last UI step I did was to add a button that will be used to unstick the player. So if they press this button, they will be teleported back to the start, or it can be wherever you choose. Pick whatever symbol you want and then copy the index number because we are going to need that for the node graph. This node graph is stored on the player. The node graph starts with when UI control group is triggered, and I use the blue equal node to specify which UI button was pressed. So I wanted to equal the index number for the unstick button that we copied from the UI interface setup. That was push is the same as the unstick UI button. Then the player will be teleported to the coordinates I specified in this teleport node. So I just use the start coordinates from here. Wow, we are almost done. Time for the finishing touches. Click on the hamburger icon in the top left and open your stage settings. Under the Basic tab, you may need to adjust your effective scene range after activation. If you made the stage larger than the initial train that it started with, then it's easy to change this to like 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000, for example. And most likely this setting will cover the expanse of your build. If not, you will have to set it in this custom option. Next, set the time you want your stage to start. For this Christmas build, I wanted it to be night, and I also set the time elapsed per second to 0, because I didn't want the time to change, but always stay night. Next, make sure you have a spawning point. When you start a new Wonderland, there is a default preset, always out on the train. It's that little white arrow that you can move around. You can also make more spawning points and have different points for different players if you want. Then we need to set the mood. We need some background music. Click on the hamburger icon on the top left again and select Manage Background Music. Scroll through the different music options and select one that has the right vibe for your Wonderland. And with that, we are done, and it's time to test the Wonderland and make sure everything works right. For testing, I do many rounds. First, I test it myself, and I try to break the game. I check all the borders and see if I can escape. And I try to break the game mechanics, like spamming tabs, for example. After I found everything wrong and fixed it, I go back to play the game normally and see if it works smoothly and makes sense. Once I'm satisfied, I recruit friends. I'll have a couple friends try to break the game and several friends to play through to record their gameplay experience. It's important to have players from all device types, particularly PlayStation, as there are often bugs with that system. Having others play through experience is important because what's often clear and makes sense to oneself, I mean, I designed it, it should make sense to me, is not obvious to another player. I know I made many changes to my gameplay on the Slime Pals game due to player feedback, for example. This is just more video of me catching snowflakes, so we'll speed that up. Now that I've caught 10, we've got victory. The game functionality works, so testing complete. After you finish testing, it's time to upload and publish your game. On your local save page, click the 3 dots under your Wonderland and select Upload Save. Your Wonderland that you've uploaded to the live server can be found in the Uploaded tab at the top. Immediately, the pop-up for the stage image resources will come up, but you can always fill it out later if you haven't made a game thumbnail or a game loading screen if you plan to make something different for that. I recommend using Canva for making game thumbnails. It's very easy to use, and there's many templates that you can work off of. I'd recommend using scenes from your Wonderland game. The other options like the achievements and gift boxes are locked behind higher creator levels, so don't worry about that right now. The last thing to fill out is the preview info. This info is what appears in the pop-up preview when someone clicks on your thumbnail and is thinking about playing your game. Upload the stage cover image you made and fill out the game details and stage descriptions. Then select the appropriate tags for your game that players will use to filter games when searching. Lastly, you can add more preview photos of your game or a video of the gameplay. When finished, click Submit. And then you have to wait for everything to be approved. Once it's finally approved, click Publish on both the stage, preview info, and image assets. Now your Wonderland is up on a live Genshin server and anyone can play it. Congratulations! And good luck on the performance of your first Wonderland. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe.